Let's take a closer look at the Black Series 6-inch Boba Fett throne room action figure.
Varykino, living the Star Wars life.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Varykino YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be taking a closer look at the Black Series Boba Fett throne room 6-inch action figure. This is an older figure from Hasbro, back when they are still doing the windows for the Black Series boxed figures, but we were unsure about whether we wanted to open this one up or keep it boxed. We've come to the decision we're going to open them up. So today's the day to finally get them all out, set them up and take a closer look. So before we do that, let's take a closer look at the packaging. This has this sort of darker green color scheme for the Book of Boba Fett series. Each of the Black Series Star Wars lines has a color scheme to note which franchise one is from. This is the Book of Boba Fett, which has an appropriate Boba Fett green, which I think is really cool. The side art has very classic art of Boba Fett posing. We've got a little bit of his throne in the background there. Very cool. So we've got a little bit of text and some more artwork here on the back, and it says, once regarded as one of the most fearsome and capable bounty hunters in the galaxy, Boba Fett seemingly met his demise in the Sarlacc pit. A survivor to the core, Fett lived to fight another day. So of course that's just not too spoilery, obviously giving us a little bit of a clue to the start of the Book of Boba Fett series. This one is number 2 from that series there on the back. So all in all, pretty classic. This one is one of their deluxe figures. You can see this is slightly wider than a standard Black Series box. They tend to do this for the Mandalorian characters that have a large jetpack on the side. Unfortunately, that means that despite there only being 1 or 2 extra accessories, they generally do have a higher retail price. We did wait to try and pick this one up on sale rather than paying the full price for this figure, because it's a pretty standard figure. We've just got basically a helmet and a jetpack extra. Doesn't really seem like it's quite worth that higher price markup. So without further ado, let's get stuck in and take a closer look. I'm going to be opening this one up from the underside. That's the way I like to do it. There's a lot of sort of window and hanger at the top. That just means it's a little trickier to get into. Okay. Nice and easy slide out tray. We've got the nice big clear plastic window here. Let's take that one off. Lots of packaging everywhere, and we can take a closer look at the figure. Let's see how easy it is to get them out. Okay, so that wasn't too hard to get out of the packaging. Now we can take a closer look at the figure, and my first impression is there's some pretty good detail here. We can see that this is a pretty good likeness of Temuera Morrison. I have met him in person a few times, so I think this looks pretty cool. We've got some cool detail of the sort of the scarring on his face from his time in the Sarlacc pit. We've got some very small paint app detail here on his chest and on his shoulder, of course. We can see we've got some attachment points here on the back for his jetpack. Lots of interesting articulation here on the legs because, of course, he has these sort of skirt sections, so we'll take a closer look at that. And we've got some tubes down the arm, so it'll be interesting to see how the articulation works with that as well. Overall, I think the paint job on this one looks very good. Of course, with Hasbro's windowed packaging, you can check out the face paint and see if it's a good one. You know, that there isn't like eyes misaligned or some paint splotch or something else like that. This looks pretty good. We can see all these small details here on the front, the little tiny little dots down here, the paint on the belt buckle, the small sort of silver details. It's looking pretty good, really. Obviously, the paint job on the head's not going to be too complicated. They have cast it in a flesh-toned plastic, so it's just that small details there on the front, but I think that looks pretty good. And yeah, the rest of it's obviously a bit more sort of standardized color. I'm interested to see how this articulation around the sort of skirt, pants and knee armor is going to go. That's quite interesting. We'll try a few poses. So before I get onto that, let's see how hard it is to put this on. If you've seen our other videos, you'll know that I spent quite a bit of time trying to get the backpack on the Ned B 6-inch figure, and that was quite tricky. So I'm hoping this one is easier. We can see that there are 2 slots and a peg that should hopefully fit nicely into these 2 here. So let's see how well this fits in. Okay, a little bit of wriggling. That's quite stiff. Interesting to see how well these pegs line up. I feel like one of them doesn't really want to line up for me. Let's see. Okay, it's just a bit of a tight fit. I'm always curious whether things will kind of just press in very tightly or kind of click into place. But I think that's pressed in pretty well. I don't see a significant gap there, and it feels pretty sturdy, like it's not going to come off. We can see that this backpack is kind of cast. We can see the sort of seam line here down the side, but most of the time that's going to be hidden by the little sort of jets here on the sides. You can just kind of see that there. Okay, so take a look at some of the other details, like the helmet. So I'm just going to put Boba Fett down. We can have a look at this helmet. Okay, that is a movable rangefinder. That is really quite cool. I'm a little nervous about breaking it, to be honest, because that feels like a really sort of delicate detail there, something I'm not really used to seeing. Most of the time these rangefinders, I mean, they're fairly flexible, so you can't snap them off, but that's really interesting. We've got some tiny silver weathering there on the front, looking very good. Classic striping, all the detail paint here looking pretty good. And the black on the visor looks pretty straight. You know, sometimes you get a little bit of sort of where it's misaligned and it's kind of over the edge or not over the edge enough. It's looking pretty good. Pretty good detail. And there's like a sort of a little cap in there. That's interesting. Okay, so let's see how well it fits on Boba. Okay. Bit of a tight fit, as we would expect to maintain proportions, but overall I think that's pretty good for the figure. Obviously with this version of Boba Fett, he doesn't have hair as this figure. We've seen in certain other figures with the hair, it makes the helmet sort of oversized so that it can fit over the top. Because he has a bald head, we can have a much more sort of smoother fit with the sort of dome helmet. And I think the overall scale and proportion with the figure is pretty good. I think that looks good. So not too hard to get that on and off. It's kind of going to stick a little bit, but yeah, I'm the sort of person that doesn't like to take the helmets on and off constantly, because I am always worried about you know, damaging the face paint a little bit, or just you know, accidentally scratching it somehow. And he does actually wear his helmet off a fair bit in the show, so I don't mind. Generally though, on like, I don't know. I don't know whether I really want to display him with the helmet or with this face. I think this face sculpt is pretty good. I'm kind of leaning towards leaving the helmet off. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, let's take a look at the articulation. First one I notice is this one sort of backwards and forwards here, just above the belt. We've got a little bit of side movement, not too much. I can see we've got standard shoulders. There looks like that's just a sculpt line there at the top of the sort of where the garment closes there. We've got a classic elbow and wrist. We've got a closed hand. Oops, just knocked his backpack off. On this side, we have got elbow articulation, but the tubes are actually surprisingly good at flowing with that. I was a little bit worried that that might limit the movement, but I can still get a pretty good amount of rotation. I'm obviously not going to go all the way around, but I can get a pretty good range of motion there. So that's really quite cool. There's enough flex in there and from the attachment point. I'm not going to stress that and figure out how far around I can turn them around. I also have a pretty good range of motion here with that shoulder piece there as well. That's not really cutting in like I thought it might. That's really quite nice. And of course, classic wrist ones there. We have got a bit more of a trigger finger sculpt on this hand. So that's really quite interesting. Sorry, I was getting quite distracted watching the tubes there in person. I think those look really quite cool. Very good motion there. Okay, now onto the skirt slash pants. There's a lot going on here. I'm just going to move his arms up so I can see what's going on. So the first thing on this leg here, I can see that there is articulation at the upper thigh. We can see that movement there. Then I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so there's movement at this point here. It's kind of hard to see. This line here, we've got articulation side to side. And how much movement do I have? Okay, yes. Okay, well, so we can pull back. We can see the sort of interesting articulation going on here at the knee. And when he pulls that down, we can see his sort of kneecaps here. Not really exactly aligned at the knee. They're kind of a little bit down low, sort of more at the top of the boot. And of course, we've got some articulation there just under, if I can hold that leg still. The foot is rotating separate to those knee pads, and we've got some ankle movement here as well, so we can get some poses. Not the most, there's a little bit of movement there. They're pretty tight, just kind of a little bit backwards and forwards there. Okay, those leg ones are very stiff though. I'm trying to get that one back into position actually. Oh, okay, that one's snapped in. So the posability is there if you really want to, but they're quite stiff. Okay, so on the other side, we've got these extra skirt parts. We can see that the holster going around the upper thigh. The holster is, it looks sculpted on, but this part is actually, well, it's attached here, but that's actually movable. That's not sculpted on his thigh, so that's kind of fun. And we've got these two skirt parts, quite flexible. It's good for posing. We have the same, basically sculpting here, a join at the very upper thigh here, and again at this awkward knee joint. I gotta give them props to putting it in there because I didn't know how they were going to do the posing there, but it does look a little bit awkward. I mean, it's pretty better from the front because you get the pants sculpting, and it's obviously just kind of got this big slightly square peg sort of motion there at the back, and the joints are quite stiff. I kind of have to okay, they're back. But overall, an impressive range of motion there for considering how they would sculpt that in the segments there. Very cool. Okay, he's actually got pretty free range of movement in his arms. I'm kind of surprised considering how tight he is in his legs. I'm not sure that I'm going to really try and pose him in like a kneeling position or something like that. I'm probably more likely to have him standing. So let's check out his blasters. So just get him to stand there for a minute. We've got his long rifle there. Pretty standard paint job, little bit of brown here, and the rest is kind of just a dark gray. This backside looks a little less interesting, not as much paint detail. I guess just this little detail here kind of gives the front just a little bit more interest, but yeah, pretty standard Star Wars weapon. And he's got his little blaster pistol here. It's got some fine detail, not too complicated paint job. Let's see how this fits in his hand and his holster. It's quite small. So let's see how well this is going to fit in. Okay, a bit tight. You can kind of hear the plastic clicking a little bit, but that's in there. He holds that pretty well, pretty tightly. It looks like a proper pose with his hand. Doesn't look too sort of awkward. And yeah, I mean, it's a little bit hard to hold because some of these bits, this is solid, this end bit, this little bit has a bit of flex to it, but that wasn't too hard to pop that in his hand. So see if I can get this back out. A bit easier out than in. Let's see, his holster does fit it, and that fits in pretty well. I think that looks pretty good, fits in there nicely. I always like it when the holsters and attachment points hold weapons, so I'm not worried about losing them if I choose to display them there. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's try this one. It's interesting. I've noticed with some of these figures, the triggers don't necessarily line up with where their fingers are. Let's see how easily this is to put in his hand. This is going to be tricky. I don't know that that really wants to... Oh, golly. This is hard. I am quite envious of the people that managed to pose their Black Series figures for very realistic action figure photos, to be honest, because trying to get these little figures to hold their weapons is a job in itself. This is going to be one of those ones where I'm going to wrangle with it a bit off camera, I think. With some help from my husband, we finally got Boba Fett holding his blaster. I think it looks really cool when you actually do get his hand to grip that, but it is a bit of a fight. I feel like the hand and the shape of his blaster here are not quite a perfect fit, so it's quite a mission to get that in there. I'm always very nervous that I'm going to break either the fingers or the weapon itself, and that would be an absolute shame. But overall, I think this is a very cool figure. Nothing too surprising from what we could see of the figure in the windowed box, but just being able to sort of see the paint job up close, take a look at the articulation, and yeah, I think it's going to look really cool on our shelf as the starting point for a Book of Boba Fett Black Series collection. You know, we were not too sure if we would fully go down the Black Series collecting route, but obviously with The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, they're filling in all the gaps, all the character variations. I think you can really do some fantastic scenes with the variations that are available out there. I'm definitely keen to see more Book of Boba Fett figures out of their packaging so we can start to build a scene now that we have the man himself here. I think this looks really cool. Sorry, I'm not going to pose his arm down. I'm really worried I'm going to knock this out. I think that holster works really well. The backpack is a little bit of a hard press to get that on, but once it's on, it feels okay. I can knock it off, but once he's on a shelf, I think that's going to be fine. He stands pretty well, even with that hard plastic backpack on. He's a pretty sturdy figure. He doesn't feel like he's going to topple at all. And of course, that cool helmet that fits on pretty well. I'll see if I can do this without knocking it over. See? Fits on pretty well, and you can even do that cool little rangefinder moment that we see him do. I think that's really cool. Good paint job, good articulation. I think this is a great figure. Obviously there's some frustrating points, but I think now that he is all posed, I think that this looks fabulous, and I can't wait to build up a whole display of Book of Boba Fett Black Series figures. We'll have some more photos up on the blog so you can check them all out for those small details. I'm really quite impressed with the paint job of these small details on his armor. I think it looks really cool. Thank you so much for watching. Do check out our other videos if you want to see more Star Wars collectible unboxings and more Star Wars adventures. See you in the next one, and as always, may the Force be with you.
If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like. Check out our other videos and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.